Another Warrior Creed live stream with me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And today's topic is the topic surrounding peace in the Middle East, with the signing ceremony for Trump, the Iranians, the Israelis, under the auspices of the Pakistanis, set to be this Friday in Geneva. Yes, there is now a signed peace deal between the Iranian theocracy and the United States of America. This is the cartoon for today's stream. You can see that is a homage to a British artist, David Hockney, who passed away this week, in fact, and his famous painting of a splash and a swimming pool. But of course, this has been adjusted to depict instead President Trump, and it's called A Bigger Splash. And that is him jumping into the pool and disturbing the oil tankers and the dove of peace. Let's not blow it, he says, a bigger splash. You can see the homage to Hockney on the right, top right corner. It says, after David Hockney, R.I.P. So that is the cartoon for today. The title for today's stream, Trump berates Israel as he agrees peace with Iran. We're going to show you that title as well, and you can see the topic for today. Trump berates Israel as he agrees peace with Iran. That should be on your screens right about now. And of course, this deal, there is the title, this way, there we are. There is the title. Deal has been met with some criticism from the Israelis, from many, in fact, Israeli leaders and opposition figures, politicians. But nevertheless, our view is that the deal will hold, God willing, and will allow us to enter into a period of relative peace in the Middle East. So that is the topic for today's stream. We are going to break all of this down for you, discuss who exactly has agreed to the peace deal, what the reactions of various countries and various factions are, and who has criticized the peace deal, and of course provide you with our analysis. All of that coming up. Don't go anywhere. That is the topic there on your screens. You can see it. Trump berates Israel and agrees peace with Iran. Do not go anywhere. We will be back right after the opening credits and then go into the details of this stream. So back in a moment.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength of street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.
Damn, that shit was dope.
And welcome back to the Warrior Creed live stream. You're listening to me, the radical Majid Nawaz. And today, as we have just introduced, the topic for today's stream, peace with Iran has been agreed. Those of you who caught our stream last week will remember where Trump said, "I call the shots." That was a sign of things to come. It was us saying that the peace deal is indeed going to happen, despite all the naysayers. Many of you who watched that stream or read the weekly Radical Dispatch will remember that particular topic. Trump telling the Israelis, "I call the shots. You will have to accept this deal once we announce it." Well, that's where we are now, folks. We've arrived at that moment. The deal is due to be signed this Friday in Geneva. Of course, we're on Tuesday today, and President Trump has already arrived in Geneva for a G7 summit, and the Pakistanis have announced that the deal will be signed there. This is the cartoon for today's stream, a homage to the late British artist David Hockney. You can see the homage there written at the top right of the screen, or the top left, depending on which perspective you're looking at it from. But you can see the cartoon there saying, "After David Hockney, R.I.P." But the actual main cartoon is Trump jumping into a swimming pool. That is, of course, based on the original David Hockney splash swimming pool scene. And it's a bigger splash. It's called "Let's Not Blow It," says Trump. That is, of course, there is a lot of expectation from our side that this peace deal will not be blown. It will indeed hold. But the topic the title for the stream today: Trump berates Israel and agrees peace with Iran. And that's because the Israelis have criticized this deal, though, of course, Netanyahu, who's currently leading that country, has gone effectively hand in glove with Trump all the way up until this point. He now faces perhaps one of the biggest challenges of his career. And we're going to break all of that down for you. But there is the topic there. Trump berates Israel and agrees peace with Iran. Let's get straight to our breakdown. So matters unfolded, first of all, with a White House announcement, and the White House formally and officially announced the fact that a peace deal with Iran had been agreed. That is now enlarged on your screens. You can see the White House official feed. It says the deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. Congratulations to all, President Donald J. Trump. And what he's done there is posted his own Truth Social post. President Trump has taken to posting groundbreaking global news on his own social media. So people, as a result, simply follow and watch his social media in order to understand what's going on. And you can see the post that Trump has put up. It says the deal with the Islamic Republic of Iran is now complete. Congratulations to all. I hereby fully authorize the toll-free opening of the Strait of Hormuz and simultaneously herewith authorize the immediate removal of the United States naval blockade. Ships of the world, start your engines. Let the oil flow. Signed, President Donald J. Trump. So it is typical and usual in his usual style. That is President Trump announcing, though, news that is truly groundbreaking, and that is the end of the war in the Middle East involving Iran. Now, many of you may be thinking we've been here before. There have been ceasefires and then bombings after ceasefires. This isn't that. Let's reassure you, this is a memorandum of understanding secured by Pakistan, mediated by Pakistan between the Americans and the Iranians. And baked into this is the assumption that the Israelis would do as they are told by the Americans. And what we're going to bring you is audio of Trump effectively saying that regardless. Now, last week's stream, we played you audio of President Trump telling Netanyahu, I call the shots. Netanyahu will do whatever I tell him to do. That was all last week's stream. If you want to refresh your memories, go back to majidnawaz.substack.com, find Radical Media, and you'll see last week's written dispatch, free for all subscribers. And of course, the podcast version of this stream for premium paying members of subscribers. And you can hear Trump effectively telegraphing to the Israelis that this is going to be done and you're going to have to accept it whether you like it or not. Now, Netanyahu is in a very, very, very difficult position as a result. We'll come to Israel's reaction in a moment, but more on President Trump announcing the deal. Again, what you should be able to see on your screens now is another Truth Social post by President Trump. We've enlarged it there for you. It says, this great deal will bring peace and security to the whole region. Many presidents have tried to make peace with Iran, and all have failed before me. The leaders of the region have, for the first time, found a president who can help them achieve real peace. With the opening of the strait, upon the signing of the deal on Friday, for purposes of mine removal, oil will flow on both ends again for the region and the world. Signed, President Donald J. Trump. It is this note here that many presidents before me have tried. So that's, of course, a reference to the Obama deal with the Iranians. And the Obama deal, it is important to note what is the difference between what Trump has achieved here and the Obama deal. Many critics of Trump will accuse him of having waged war, gone through all of this trouble, tanked the world's economy, only to end up where Obama arrived already in Obama's deal that Trump famously scrapped. Unfortunately, that misses a key part of the equation. And that part is only understandable if, or for those who follow the Middle East forensically. Obama's deal did not bring the Israelis along with it. Now, you can still see, and we're going to get to some of that, the Israelis are still opposed even to President Trump's deal. The difference is that with Obama's deal, what the Americans didn't have was a Netanyahu in place working hand in glove with Obama to arrive at that end point. So just as it took Ariel Sharon to unilaterally withdraw from Gaza, the original withdrawal, of course, that's now since been reversed because of October the 7th, but it took a warhawk such as Sharon, a well-known Israeli military leader, to pull Israel out of the Gaza Strip originally. Like that, it took somebody like Netanyahu to have such a firm grip on Israeli politics to be able to bring Israeli society with President Trump to this point. Up until now, as this deal has been agreed, and the signing is this Friday, Netanyahu has not rejected the deal. He has made some caveats. He has nodded at some of the criticisms because, of course, Israeli politicians, opposition, and others, hardliners, his hardliners even within his own administration, such as Ben Gvir and others, have all criticized and forecasted that they will reject this deal. But Netanyahu hasn't. And that's the key difference here, that it appears as if Netanyahu's position inside Israel now is an highly strategic American asset working to make sure that Trump's deal is delivered. Whatever happens after Netanyahu's political career is over, if the deal is implemented, it would become very difficult institutionally for Israel to retreat or to reverse from the deal that Netanyahu would have already agreed once he commits Israel to the signing ceremony and beyond, the technical implementation and technical negotiations of the deal after the signing ceremony. So that is the difference between what Trump's achieved now and what Obama did. Yes, it took military conflict to get to this point, but the point is that Israel, with Netanyahu as its prime minister, would not be at the table signing and agreeing to this deal if this military conflict hadn't been exhausted out in the way that it has. And Trump himself has stated explicitly that the Israeli military effort is exhausted and needs to stop. That is the key difference here. Obama's deal was between Iran and America. This deal, of course, mediated by the Pakistanis, providing a nuclear guarantor that Iran will toe the line in the region, has the Israelis on board with Trump via Netanyahu, the key singular figure that makes that sentence verifiable, that the Israelis are on board with Trump. It is only because Netanyahu is there at the moment that that sentence can be said. If it wasn't for Netanyahu in that position, the Israelis would not be on board with this deal. And Netanyahu is only in that position, agreeing with Trump, because he owes, according to Trump, everything to him, and that Israel owes its very survival and its existence to him. We're going to play you some of that audio of Trump explicitly saying that. And so that key difference is important to remember. Now, the Times of London has reported on this news. We're going to show you the Times headline, which should be popping up right about now. And the headline reads, Trump says Strait partially open as deal called a failure in Israel. So you can see already that the key takeaway from this is that the Israelis are the ones now who are very upset with the deal that Trump has signed. But they are, in our view, though there is a political will inside Israel to carry on the conflict, to carry on the war, there is no political room to maneuver for the Israelis beyond this point, because Netanyahu remains prime minister and he will sign Israel up to this deal, despite what rhetoric you're hearing from inside Israel. But that is the Times of Israel heading. Trump says Strait partially open as deal called failure in Israel. The subheading, the US president said at the G7 in France that the agreement with Iran was all signed, but uncertainty remains over key elements. President Trump, reading from the Times now, President Trump declared the Strait of Hormuz partially reopened as the electronically signed peace deal with Iran was roundly criticized in Israel. Speaking at the G7 summit in France, alongside the host President Macron, Trump said that the deals all signed and predicted that the key shipping lane would be completely opened by Friday. We're going to show you video of Trump saying exactly that, as reported here by the Clash Report online. This is Trump sitting next to the Macron in France, saying that the deal has been signed and it's a It's done. It's agreed to. Let's enlarge that on your screens. You can see it for yourselves, and here we go.
It's signed, the deal's all signed, and the strait is already partially opened. As you know, they're doing a little hunting for a couple of mines that they've already found.
And that's it. The deal's already signed. It's been confirmed by the most powerful man of the most powerful nation in history, the President of the United States. The deal is signed. It's long been our view on radical media, and our regulars will be aware of this, that we are slowly inching towards, and inching towards is the key word here, we are inching towards a grand regional settlement for peace. This deal removes the root causes of the decades, plural, decades long conflict in the Middle East. The root cause were that there were two warring parties who, as our regulars would have heard us say many times, who were ideologically driven to continue war in the Middle East because they were expansionist powers who had an ideology that thrived and survived on otherizing those that didn't subscribe to it, dehumanizing them, and then conquering them. Those two ideologies, you won't be surprised, on the Iranian theocratic side was Shia Islamism, which the Iranian theocracy enforces in Iran. Now, Shia Islamism is an expansionist totalitarian ideology. It's a theocratic ideology. And as a result, Iran, that was bent on war in the region in the name of the appropriated term jihad, which really this is jihadism, not jihad, but this isn't the time to go into the distinction there. But Iran had multiple proxies around the region, such as Hamas that it was funding, such as Hezbollah that it was funding in Lebanon, such as the Houthis that they were funding in Yemen, and all of the wars in Yemen between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, in Lebanon between Lebanon and Israel, of course from Gaza between Hamas and Israel, they were all funded by Iran. So Iran on the one end was at the root cause of decades of conflict in the Middle East. On the other side of that was Israel, in the form of Likudnik Zionist ideology. Again, an expansionist ideology that sought its own war for its own purposes. And Itmar Ben-Gvir, and the national security minister in Israel, and others best represent that attitude, that mindset. And even now, he's rejected this peace deal. But frankly, he's not in charge. So what this peace deal has done, and why it's so different, is it's managed to remove, by isolating, the two root causes of war in the Middle East: the ideological faction that ran Israel in the form of the Likudnik Zionists, and the Iranian theocrats, the Shia Islamist Iranian theocrats. That's why we are very cautiously optimistic that the war in the Middle East will start to wind down, or the wars, plural, in the Middle East will start to wind down, and we will start inching towards a grand regional settlement for peace. Because the two countries that were, whether directly or via proxy, funding and instigating those wars in the Middle East have now been forced by the world's only great superpower, the United States of America, mediated by the Middle East Muslim majority world's only nuclear power, Pakistan, supported by the only Muslim majority member of NATO, Turkey, to force those two warring factions, Israel and Iran, to a memorandum of understanding that will be signed this Friday. Once the root cause of this decades of wars has been dealt with, it should become a bit easier to then deal with the next problem, which of course remains Palestine, and in particular Gaza, and the ethnic cleansing that Israel engaged in the Gaza Strip. President Trump has already said that he's also going to look immediately at Ukraine and settle the conflict there between Russia and Ukraine as well. We believe we are well on the way to continue inching towards a grand regional settlement for peace. The world, it's already been agreed, has been divided into spheres of influence. The Middle East will get its own sphere of influence, led by Sunni Muslim majority countries. Then there is, of course, the American sphere of influence, which will be the North and South Americas. Then, of course, there will be the China with its own sphere of influence in the Pacific, and Russia with its sphere of influence. That leaves Europe, which is currently in a mess, and remains to be seen exactly what will happen to Europe. But that is the way that the world is headed. And that is pretty much what you see with this peace deal unfolding. You will see the rise of Sunni Muslim majority nations, such as Pakistan, playing an increased role in international diplomacy. Of course, they have the nuclear power to back up their diplomacy and therefore have both the carrot and the stick at their disposal. But news of this peace deal has been confirmed by Iran. Of course, many Trump critics were skeptical every time Trump was saying we are close to the deal because the Iranians hadn't confirmed it. But as Al Jazeera English reports, which is now on your screens, Iran has indeed confirmed it. You can see that there. If we blow it up for you, you hopefully be able to read it as well. And that is Al Jazeera English saying Iran confirms reaching a peace deal with the US to end fighting on all fronts, including in Lebanon, as US President Donald Trump announces an end to Washington's blockade of Iranian ports. But interestingly, Lebanon has also confirmed the deal, as Al Arabiya English reports underneath Al Jazeera there. You can see it on your screen again. Lebanese Parliament Speaker and Hezbollah ally Nabih Berri welcomes US-Iran deal, thanks both countries and the mediators being Pakistan. Berri says deal lays foundation for security and stability in the region, including Lebanon. So the region and the countries involved have all confirmed and welcomed this deal as mediated by the Pakistanis. It truly is a historic moment. Now, we appeared on GB News America on the Late Show with Beverly Turner last night. It was 1 a.m. here in the UK, but of course it was prime time in the US, stating that this deal was truly a historic achievement. So we're just going to play for you what we said in the US on GB News with Beverly Turner, so that we don't have to repeat ourselves here. But it truly is a historic moment, and this is what we had to say on hearing news of the deal. First of all, it's a great moment. It's a historic moment. And before we count our chickens before they hatch, it's important to say that though, of course, the world is anticipating the signing of the peace deal on Friday, there are some strings left undone. There is, of course, the reaction of many voices inside Israel that are voices, even interestingly, on the left, that are anti-Trump, that find themselves curiously on the same side of Israel, being skeptical of this deal, even though they are ostensibly anti-said. We are cautiously optimistic about what over the course of this week with the signing ceremony in Geneva on Friday. Of course, President Trump is already there. And this is truly a historic moment. It is something that is it changes the equation in the Middle East. The deal will mean at the end of the root cause of what has been a decades-long conflict in the Middle East. And there were really two main parties that were behind that decades-long conflict. Multiple countries, by the way, involved in that war over decades. And those two main warring factions were, of course, Iran and all of their proxies that they were backing across the region, and on the other side, Israel. Now, what President Trump has really achieved here is truly groundbreaking. No US president, even the Obama deal, that President Trump undid famously. The difference this time is that President Trump, right up until the last moment, was working hand in glove, it appeared to be, with the Israelis and taking them all the way up to this line where this peace deal has been signed. Now the Israelis have, many voices, in fact, inside Israel, have complained about the deal. But the difference this time around is there really isn't much room left for them to try and make some military maneuver, say in Lebanon, where Netanyahu's made some noises about not being happy about having to pull his troops out. The difference this time around is that if Israel were to continue this war, they would really find themselves internationally isolated, and perhaps for the first time without even US backing beyond this point as well. And now if we look to Iran, again, this war has demonstrated, what with the complete decapitation of the Iranian leadership, that Iran after doing everything it could in the region, including bombing its neighbors, found itself also Gulf states, of course backed by Pakistan, stood on the one end opposed to Iran's continued bombardment of its neighbors. So both countries found themselves. And really, what we're going to do there is we'll place that full clip for you in tomorrow's Radical Dispatch. But really, what the point there, as you can see, is that the Iranians and the Israelis, what Trump's managed to achieve politically is quite unique and unprecedented. Is why we called it truly a historic moment. Is that both the Iranians and the Israelis, or to be more precise, the Likud Zionists and the theocrats in Iran, the Shia Islamist theocrats, have found themselves isolated in the region. Think back in terms of referencing the Shia Islamist theocrat isolation, think back to when this war began, this recent one that we're just in. The Iranian theocrats started bombarding all their neighbors, sending missiles over to all the Sunni Arab Gulf states. That was a huge miscalculation. It ended up with them becoming isolated. Of course, their leadership has twice since been decapitated, and President Trump has confirmed they're now dealing with the third incarnation of their leadership. We played you a clip of Trump saying that in last week's stream. Again, you can go to majidnawaz.substack.com, Radical Media. Find it there on last week's Radical Dispatch. And Trump effectively saying he's dealing with the third incarnation of the Iranian leadership, and he finds them very rational. So the Iranian theocrats were not only isolated, they were completely obliterated. Their entire leadership was killed. Their navy was destroyed. Their air force non-existent. So the Iranian theocrats found themselves isolated. 1-0 for Trump. But so do the Likud Zionists in Israel. They now find themselves completely isolated from the region, exactly as the Iranian theocrats are. And so, hence, when you hear all of these noises coming from inside Israel about rejecting this deal, one thing you will not see, unless Netanyahu is taken out, which is unlikely at this stage, one thing you will not see is Netanyahu coming out to rescind the deal. That simply won't happen. So the Israelis can make as much noise as they want. While their prime minister remains Netanyahu, he will not rescind this deal. And so the deal will go through. And of course, he'll take the blame for the deal, even though it's gone through. Once it's gone through, it'll be very difficult for the Israelis to try and pull out of it. And of course, they will become more and more isolated the more they try to do that. And a key point to remember here is if the Israelis don't stop their bombardment of Lebanon, which Netanyahu currently is one of the caveats Netanyahu's made, will show you, is that he hasn't yet withdrawn Israeli troops from Lebanon. But the more the Israelis now, after this deal is signed on Friday, the more they continue the fight, if they ratchet up the fighting, the more isolated they will become. And the key fact here is that Israel will not be able to face the entire Middle East without American funding, military backing, and political support. Trump will, and he's made it clear, we're going to show you the clips, Trump will withdraw all of that if Israel under Netanyahu do not stick to this deal. So the more the Israelis fight, the weaker and more isolated they will become. Israel, without American backing, will not be able to stand up to the Muslim majority world's only nuclear power, Pakistan, the only Muslim majority member of NATO, Turkey, and of course, add to that Saudi Arabia, and even Syria that Trump's mentioned, we're going to show you. Israel will not be able to stand up to these countries on its own without American backing. They will lose, and the more they fight, the weaker they will become. So a prudent and wise decision for Netanyahu or Israel under Netanyahu is going to be to accept this deal. If not, they will become incredibly isolated on the world stage. And what they've faced so far is not isolation compared to what they will face if they have to enter into conflict without American backing. Then they really will feel the pinch of what it means to be isolated on the world stage. Because up until now, they could have afforded the French, the Spanish, the British abandoning them because the Americans stuck with them. And the Israelis know that. if they enter into any future conflict and the Americans aren't backing them, that will be real isolation when you don't have history's most powerful nation on your side. And that's when they'll feel the pinch of what it really means to be isolated. Israel is effectively has no room for political maneuver after this point. Of course, we've just gone into how the Iranian theocracy was also blindsided. So, moving on, the announcement was initially given by the Pakistani PM, Shahbaz Sharif. We're going to show you his announcement on social media. Of course, remember the Pakistanis have been mediating this peace deal for a long time. And it's also incredibly interesting because it's catapulted that had hitherto been seen as a global sponsor for terrorism into a new, it's cast Pakistan into a completely new light as a global peace mediator, who, as a country that has effectively helped President Trump avoid World War III. It is a remarkable turnaround for Pakistan. Here is Pakistan's Prime Minister, Shahbaz Sharif, and he's saying, following intensive talks, we are pleased to announce that the peace deal between the United States of America and Islamic Republic of Iran has been reached. Both sides have declared the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. The official signing ceremony will be on Friday, 19th of June in Switzerland. We would like to thank the United States of America and the Islamic Republic of Iran for their commitment to finding a diplomatic solution to the conflict. We would also like to extend our sincere appreciation to our brothers in this mediation effort, the great leadership of the state of Qatar for their support in reaching this agreement. I would also especially thank the visionary leadership of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and Republic of Turkey for their immense contributions in this regard. With the agreement now in place, mediators will facilitate a series of meetings this week. These pre-implementation discussions will lay the foundation for the technical talks and the official signing ceremony. It is truly a groundbreaking historic deal that the Pakistanis are rightfully proud of having mediated. So that is the Pakistanis, but of course we've just mentioned Turkey as well, because this is, when we say it's a grand regional settlement for peace, all of the countries in the region have been involved in this under Pakistani leadership. In terms of Middle East efforts, all of the Middle Eastern countries have been behind Pakistan in securing this diplomatic breakthrough with the United States of America, which is why if the Iranian theocrats want to continue the war, they will be isolated. The Turks have a very strong military and are a member of NATO. The Pakistanis, nuclear power. Iran will find it very difficult to stand up against just these two nations on their own, let alone once you add Saudi Arabia to it as well. And that's what ensures, with a nuclear umbrella for the region provided by Pakistan, that's what ensures that there will be this time a successful deal, because the negotiations have broadened out to include the whole region. And here is Erdogan of Turkey's response. He's also welcomed the deal. NATO member Turkey. He's incredibly welcoming and happy about the fact that this deal has been signed. You can see that on your screens now. What we'll do is blow it up on your full screen so you can see Erdogan's speech acknowledging this deal as well. There he is, Turkish media, TRT World. Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan, speaking after a cabinet meeting, welcomed the US-Iran agreement to end the war, calling it a positive step for the region. He also warned against Israeli provocations and possible sabotage efforts before the deal is formally signed. Note, by the way, that the Pakistani Prime Minister also did not thank Israel in his social media announcement. Here is Erdogan. This is in Turkish, but you'll see the subtitles under the video. And for those who are listening on the podcast form, we will read for you afterwards a key quote from what Erdogan has says here.
Varılan mutabakattan bölgemiz ve tüm insanlık adına büyük memnuniyet duyuyoruz. Mutabakatın bölgemizde kalıcı barış ve istikrarın tesisine giden yolu ardına kadar aşmasını, aylar sonra bölgemize ve tüm dünyaya rahat bir nefes aldıran bu önemli mutabakata ulaşılmasında emeği geçen, başta Amerikan ve İran liderliği olmak üzere herkesi gönülden tebrik ediyorum. Arabuluculuk görevini layıkıyla yerine getiren Pakistanlı kardeşlerimizle müzakerelere desteklerini esirgemeyen Katarlı ve Suudi kardeşlerimize aynı şekilde tebriklerimizi iletiyorum. Tüm umutlarını bölgemizde silah seslerinin susmamasına bağlayanlar, gayet iyi biliyoruz ki barış ikliminin güçler defalarca yaptıkları gibi bu sürece de çomak sokmak için ellerinden geleni yapacaklardır. Ellerinde Filistinli ve Lübnanlı masumların kanı olan katliam şebekesinin dün ve bugün yaptığı açıklamaları bunun işaretleri olarak görüyoruz. Dolayısıyla imzaların atılacağı güne kadarki süreçte gerilimi tırmandıracak her türlü söylem ve eylemden uzak durulması, sabotajlara karşı çok ama çok dikkatli olunması gerekmektedir.
Now, that was the president of Turkey, Erdogan. What he effectively said, for those of you who are listening and unable to read the subtitles in the video, as you can see, Turkish media reporting, he said, "We hope that this agreement will open wide the path towards establishing lasting peace and stability in our region." But the key point here, again, in the TRT World Post, it reiterates this point, is that in the speech, he warns against sabotage efforts to undermine this peace deal, specifically nodding to the fact that Israelis, many key voices inside Israel, are currently rejecting the deal, which, of course, those of our regulars who've been following this from a long time, many years now, on Radical Media will know that that's always been the case, that the Likudnik Zionists have been provoking war in order to avoid coming to this point. And it's why President Trump has been roundly rejected across the political spectrum, because, of course, the uniparty globalists have infiltrated across the political spectrum. And so warmongering neocon globalists exist in the left and the right. They were giving the impression that the political leaders across the board reject Trump, when truly what was going on is that globalist assets in the left and the right were rejecting Trump because they knew that Trump was about to force a deal. And that's precisely what's happened. Now, interestingly, even Hamas has accepted the deal, which is, again, a stern rebuttal to the Israeli narrative. Hamas have accepted the deal. We're going to show you that on your screens now. And it leaves only those warmongers who are either in the Likudnik Zionist camp or in the hardline Iranian theocrat camp who would oppose the deal. But here is, we'll enlarge it so you can see. Here's Dropsite News reporting on the Hamas position. Just to read it for you there, Dropsite says, Hamas has issued an official statement welcoming the US-Iran Memorandum of Understanding, congratulating Iran's leadership and praising its steadfastness in resisting external pressure. The group said it hopes the agreement will help bring an immediate end to Israel's war on Gaza and repeated attacks on Lebanon, while saying that lasting regional stability cannot be achieved without ending Israel's campaign of, quote, extermination, starvation, and displacement, end of quote, against Palestinians and addressing the root causes of the conflict. The full Hamas statement we will be publishing in the weekly Radical Dispatch, along with all of the other receipts that we've been showing you. Go to majidnawaz.substack.com. That's where you'll find Radical Media. And tomorrow, the written version of this stream will be published. You'll be able to see the full Hamas statement in that video. Moving to those countries that have opposed the deal, of course, we mentioned Israel. So moving to those factions and countries that have opposed the deal, we'll give you a framework to understand this, first of all, before we go into some of that detail. This was our immediate reaction to the deal yesterday. That should be on your screens now. We'll enlarge it and read it for you as well. There you go. And what we said is the following. Now that Pakistan has secured a peace deal, you will see, quote unquote, anti-war pundits react as if they want more war rather than grant Trump credit for forcing a peace between Iran and Israel. The two countries behind decades of war across multiple countries in the Middle East, that's Iran and Israel. These anti-war voices are really just anti-Trump talking heads who will now join Israel in attempting to undermine Trump's peace while missing the irony completely. So that was our immediate reaction yesterday to the news when it broke. And of course, that's what's transpired. You've seen, as expected, Israeli voices opposing this peace deal because the extreme Likud Zionists are effectively warmongers, as extreme as the Iranian theocratic warmongers, people such as Itmar Ben-Gvir. However, what you've also seen is those who are ostensibly anti-war but are in fact just anti-Trump voices who complain every step along the way at anything President Trump does. So when this conflict initially began, they complained. Now that complaint was in line with their anti-war position. So it was easier for them to complain then and say, look, you're meant to be anti-war, Majid, and President Trump started war with Iran. Why haven't you turned against him? And our point was, as our regulars will know, that this conflict that President Trump's involved himself with in Iran is to end the conflict. It was in order to end the war. Decades long, multiple countries of a war don't get ended by wishful thinking and protests and placards. They get ended by getting your hands dirty, which is why President Trump's slogan was peace through strength. He got into the mud, wrestled with the pigs, defeated them, and then said, now you're going to agree to peace. That required a bit of wrestling. But the anti-Trump voices weren't convinced. Of course, history's proven us right. Now you see that the peace deal has been agreed. It will be signed this Friday, God willing. But the anti-Trump voices then, at least their criticism was consistent with their ostensible position, that they're anti-war, and so they're criticizing Trump joining a war. Now that the peace has been agreed, if they're meant to be anti-war, why are they not happy with the fact that President Trump has forced a peace between these two warring factions, the Iranian theocrats and the Likud Zionists? Instead, what you hear from them is either criticism that Trump engaged in this whole thing, and it was folly, only to end up back where Obama ended up in the first place, which is factually wrong, because Obama didn't have a Netanyahu leading the country of Israel, forcing this deal through for him on the Israeli side. So it's just simply factually wrong. And the second reaction you see from them is silence. So those who have, on multiple occasions, you know who they are, who have flip-flopped their support from being never Trumpers to being Trumpers to once again now becoming anti-Trump. You'll see that those ostensibly anti-war voices, social media influencers in particular, are curiously silent at the fact that President Trump has managed to secure this peace deal with the mediation of Pakistan. And the Times of London summarizes it nicely. And we're going to bring that up on your screens now because it includes, interestingly, the intelligence community and the alphabet agencies of the United States of America, who, our regulars will know, have always been opposed to President Trump. But this is curious. Have a look at this. It's on your screens now from the Times today. It's the same article we showed you earlier. It says, Trump says straight partially open his deal called failure in Israel. That's the headline of the article. We're going to read a key extract from that piece for you, and we'll blow it up on your screens and read it as we do. There it is. While Vance, along with the U.S. envoys Stephen Witkoff and Jared Kushner, is believed to have argued for the agreement in private, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and Pete Hegseth, the War Secretary, who those who follow our social media, we a couple of weeks ago called him Max Headroom because of the uncanny similarity between Pete Hegseth and Max Headroom. What we might do as an added bonus for our paying subscribers in the Radical Dispatch that we put out tomorrow is include the video we put up making that comparison. It is very, very uncanny and curious the way in which Pete Hegseth actually looks like Max Headroom, the famous 80s TV character. Nevertheless, we carry on reading from the Times. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and Pete Hegseth, the War Secretary, have raised concerns about it, Axios reported. The intelligence reflects that the Iranian intentions are not in line with their commitments under the deal, one source told the news outlet, after intelligence agencies supposedly concluded that the way Iranian officials were discussing the deal among themselves was inconsistent with what they were telling the mediators. So here we have it. Axios reporting from sources in the intelligence community that the intelligence community, in other words, the alphabet agencies of the United States of America, at their head, the CIA, are working to undermine Trump. They always have been. And now that this peace deal has been agreed, again, they're briefing media that they don't believe it. The truth is, it's these intelligence agencies that are the neocon warhawks who have been working with the globalists to undermine Trump in America all along. And they've been working in Britain to undermine the soon-to-be Prime Minister of this country, Nigel Farage. It's the intelligence communities who are losing what is effectively a civil war within our countries between patriots, those who are anti-war patriots who put their country first, and the globalist neocon warmongers, led in particular by the intelligence communities. It was the intelligence communities that started all of this war in the first place. It was they who invaded Iraq. It was they who were convinced our political leadership back when Iraq was invaded to do so. So it's no surprise that the alphabet agencies in America, dominated, controlled, and run by globalists as they are, have been briefing media against Trump's peace. That comes as no surprise whatsoever. In fact, it's as unsurprising as it is that the Israelis have also opposed the peace as well, except Netanyahu, crucially. With that said, it will be even less of a surprise for you once you've heard that, and our regulars will understand why, that the Iranian monarchist, grandson of the Shah of Iran, the late previous king, Reza Pahlavi, has also opposed the deal. Of course he would, because it means he can never be leader of Iran. Now, of course, our regulars will know that the entire thing with Reza Pahlavi was a joke, and we said it was a joke from the beginning. He had absolutely no influence on the ground inside Iran. The so-called regime change that this war was meant to bring about proved that he had absolutely no groundwork inside Iran. And our regulars will know that we called him the new Ahmad Chalabi, but this time of Iran instead of Iraq. Those who are old enough to remember the disastrous neocon invasion of Iraq will remember a similar figure, a similar Rasputin-like figure in Iraq, or Iraqi, but in America, naming himself Ahmad Chalabi, leader of the so-called Iraqi National Congress, who managed to convince the neocons, the Rumsfelds and the President Bushes, that if they were to overthrow the Ba'athist regime of Saddam Hussein, he would be so popular inside Iraq that he would become the natural popular choice to lead that country, Ahmad Chalabi. Of course, once the Americans invaded Iraq, they learned very quickly that nobody had heard of this guy. He was an absolutely zero-nothing entity inside Iraq. And of course, Ahmad Chalabi had to waft away. Now, the attempt to do that again with Iran was as represented in this figure of Reza Pahlavi, the grandson of the late Shah of Iran. And Pahlavi was a monarchist. And of course, it's a bit difficult to convince people of the fact that there isn't a cognitive dissonance here when you're encouraging the opposition of Iran to rise up, in particular the women, to rise up against the Iranian theocracy. And by the way, we're with them in this regard. Iran currently is a theocracy, and theocracies are tyrannical. But if you're going to encourage the feminists, the brave feminists in Iran, to rise up against theocracy, only to then bring a patriarchal monarchy in its place, of course, that's not going to wash. Pahlavi had absolutely no influence inside Iran or indeed inside the Iranian opposition. And here he is rejecting the deal. The Times reports it. We're just going to read it for you on your screens. It says here, early signs of a backlash also included the initial reaction from Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the Shah, who told the Times that any deal with this regime will ultimately fail. But as you would by now not be surprised, the warmongering uni party of inside Washington, D.C. also opposed the deal. That is again from the Times on your screens now. We'll read it for you. In Washington, Democrats demanded immediate publication of the terms. The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer called on Trump to brief Congress. The American people deserve details and full transparency. What exactly is in this understanding? Schumer said. Will service members remain in harm's way? What have we actually gained here from Trump's war? Well, Mr. Schumer, what we've gained is a peace. But anyway, carrying on from the Times, Lindsey Graham, a Republican senator and ally of the president, struck a note of skepticism. Yes, that's, by the way, folks, Lindsey Graham, the neocon warmonger, who was only salivating at the prospect of this of Trump's initiative in Iran because he thought that it would mean regime change. Of course, it hasn't meant regime change, and Trump's explicitly ruled out regime change. And so, like the Never Trumpers who became Trump fans and then again became Never Trumpers on social media, Lindsey Graham has flip-flopped his position again. To carry on reading, halfway down from this Times quote, Lindsey Graham, a Republican senator and ally of the president, struck a note of skepticism. He said he was somewhat concerned that Iran's view of the agreement seems different than what the American negotiating team is claiming, while describing Vance as the architect of the deal. In a sign, Republican hawks could pin any weakness on the vice president. Now that, by the way, that last detail is fascinating because, of course, don't forget, the Vice President, J.D. Vance, is Palantir and Peter Thiel's protege. He only exists in politics because of Peter Thiel's funding. So if they pin the blame on J.D. Vance, if the neocon warhawks of the Republican Party and the Uni Party generally, including all of those in the Democratic Party, the neocon warhawk globalists, if they choose to pin the blame on J.D. Vance, that's fine. That's, in fact, great. J.D. Vance is Palantir's man, the Manchurian candidate who had aspirations to be president. He is nothing but a surrogate for the technocrats. And don't forget, it was Palantir that sold Israel the AI military targeting software that they used in the ethnic cleansing of Gaza. Let J.D. Vance take the blame. It's absolutely fine. Let them fight among themselves, the technocrats and the neocons. Ultimately, President Trump succeeded, and he managed to get this deal in. Now let's move to the meat of the matter here. And that is, we said to you that Israel and many voices inside Israel have rejected the deal. We're going to show you now what the Israeli reaction has been and why we don't think it matters, and in particular because of the way President Trump has responded to that criticism. So again, from the Times today, and which is on your screens and now, we'll just read a key passage from there about why the deal was rejected in Israel and by whom. That should be enlarged for you now to all see it yourselves. In Israel, the deal was met with outcry, directed at Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, who was sidelined in the peace talks. Yair Lapid, who will challenge Netanyahu in elections this year, wrote that the deal was shaping up to be one of the most shocking failures in Israel's foreign and security policy, entirely registered in Netanyahu's name. The national security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, said, "We are not partners to this agreement, which does not safeguard our security." Netanyahu personally, by the way, as the Times says here, Netanyahu avoided criticizing the deal and called it Trump's decision, while claiming Israel had achieved its main goals in the war by eliminating the existential danger posed by Tehran. In his first public comment since it was announced, the Prime Minister insisted his country's military would remain in Lebanon, Gaza, and Syria for as long as necessary. Now, the key point here to note is that inside Israel, the deal's been roundly rejected. Like J.D. Vance in America, the fall guy for the hawks in America, the hawks, Lindsey Graham and others, the fall guy for them will be J.D. Vance and not Trump. Fine by us, right? In Israel, the fall guy for the hawks such as Itamar Ben-Gvir, their fall guy will be Netanyahu. Netanyahu, don't forget, is the leader that led the ethnic cleansing in Gaza. So once again, absolutely fine by us if he takes the blame. As long as the deal is implemented first, we frankly have no concern and no business to tell the Israelis what to do in their elections and their domestic politics. If they choose to then, once the deal's in place, to then kick out Netanyahu, the only concern we've got is the deal being in place. Why? Because naturally the rest of the world does have a concern in making sure we don't enter World War III. So naturally, it's fair for us to be concerned about stopping World War III. Beyond stopping World War III, what Israeli politics looks like on the inside is none of our business, really. So they can get rid of Netanyahu and blame him for this deal. That's fine by us, just like it's fine by us if J.D. Vance is blamed for this deal, as long as the deal stays in place. So Netanyahu is likely to take the fall for this, and the Israeli opposition is furious. Here is opposition leader Naftali Bennett telling us as much. We'll put this on your screens now and play the video for you so you can see the Israeli reaction to President Trump's peace deal as mediated by the Pakistanis. Let's enlarge that on the screens as well for you once we play, so you can see and listen to it at the same time.
I would return to the octopus doctrine that we started in the government under my leadership. On the one hand, to prevent Iran to break out to a nuclear weapon, and on the other hand, to bring to the collapse of the Iranian regime through military and diplomatic and economic tools. All this will happen. The hourglass to topple the Iranian regime will begin once the leadership in Israel is changed.
Now that's opposition leader Naftali Bennett saying that they're gonna resume the war once he gets rid of Netanyahu, and they will aim for regime change in Iran. They will collapse the regime. Good luck to them. They won't have American support. They won't do it with American funding, with American military backing, because not only has President Trump drawn a line in the sand here at this deal, but crucially, whoever comes next, whether Democrat or Republican, one thing that is for certain is that American public opinion, as we showed you in last week's stream and published in last week's Radical Dispatch, surveyed American public opinion has firmly turned against Israel. So they will not have American support. If the Israelis under Naftali Bennett or whoever takes over after Netanyahu wants to resume their war against the theocrats in Iran, good luck to them. They will be alone, and they will have to do it alone. And that won't turn out the way that it's turned out for them so far. Of that, we can assure you. So that is the status. Netanyahu is going to face severe internal criticism inside Israel for agreeing this deal. And the other thing that Naftali Bennett said in this speech that we just played you is he said that that Israel needs to adopt a more aggressive stance towards Turkey, whom he deemed as the new Iran. And that's something that President Trump has directly responded to, again, to demonstrate the point that it won't work. If the Israelis go on this alone and they start making enemies out of Turkey, of course, which has been a guarantor alongside Pakistan of this deal, Trump will want nothing to do with it. Which is why this is such a historic moment, and it's why it's so different to what Obama achieved. Because Netanyahu is in place, he will make sure the Israelis sign up to this deal. After that, whatever the Israelis do, it will be entrenched. It will be institutionally impossible for the Israelis to do much politically without completely isolating themselves. And here is President Trump's reaction to the idea that Israel may declare Turkey as the next Iran and seek a war against Turkey. This is what President Trump had to say about that.
Say that because the press will say, oh, he likes Erdogan. No, he's a hell of a leader and a strong person, very strong person. I haven't heard that at all. If I did, I'd call him, and I think I'd make sure that things were fine. I don't think that will happen with Turkey. Not as long as I'm president, because he respects me and I respect him. But beyond that, we have a good friendship. So, we'll see.
Not as long as I'm president and we have a good friendship, Turkey will not be the new Iran. President Trump is making that absolutely clear, that that's not going to happen. And if Israel does try anything like that, they will be on their own. But it isn't just Naftali Bennett. Across the board inside Israel, opinion is firmly against this peace, because Israeli society has been hijacked by the Likud Zionist warmongers, even within Netanyahu's own government. And it's going to be a very difficult few years coming up for Israel. Sorry to say, it is going to be a very difficult few years domestically, politically. Israeli society is going to have to do some serious soul searching and reckoning as to what they want to represent going forward. Here on your screens, as reported by Turkish media, TRT World, is another Israeli leader, Yair Golan, rejecting the deal. He says Netanyahu has become the father of the greatest strategic failure in Israel's history. Israeli opposition leader Yair Golan says the US-Iran agreement exposes years of policy failures by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, accusing him of weakening Israel's alliances and leaving the country isolated. The country is indeed going to be isolated, but not because Netanyahu has agreed the deal with Trump. It is if the opposition leaders, carry on, they will find just how isolated Israel will become. They are deluded if they think that the reason Israel's become isolated is because they didn't fight long and hard enough. The reason Israel has become and will become even more isolated on the world stage is because they keep fighting for too long. they keep starting war or joining war. That's why they're becoming isolated. And that is essentially even what President Trump has said. And he has said it explicitly. But before we get into that, here is the full statement of Yair Golan. He says, a tough morning for Israel. This morning, Israeli citizens are waking up to an agreement between the United States and Iran made over Israel's head. In one signature stroke, immense military achievements secured with the courage of our pilots and the blood of our fighters have been erased, while Netanyahu stood on the sidelines, weak, ill, isolated, and powerless. Trump signs an agreement that funnels billions to the Ayatollah's regime, leaves the nuclear infrastructure intact, preserves the ballistic threat as is, and throws a lifeline to the murderous regime in Tehran. This is the culmination of long years of failure. Netanyahu is the man who, for years, sold the public a false image of Mr. Security, and in reality became the father of Israel's greatest strategic failure in its history. The man who built the notion of Hamas is an asset, who enabled the flow of Qatari money, who abandoned the diplomatic arena, who dismantled Israel's alliances and left it isolated at the moment of truth. Netanyahu is good for Hamas. Netanyahu is good for Iran. Netanyahu is good for Hezbollah. Netanyahu is not good for Israel. The one who promised total victory ends his tenure with Israel's enemies stronger, Israel weaker, and the deterrence built with the blood of our fighters eroded before our very eyes. Replacing him is not just a political necessity, it is an existential security imperative. You can see there by Yair Golan, the Israeli opposition leader, that Netanyahu will be the scapegoat, taking the blame for Israel's strategic failure here in the Middle East, in the fact that Iran's regime has remained intact. And they will be reintegrated into the region. Eventually, the sanctions will be lifted. Iran and the theocracy will be normalized. This third incarnation of their leadership is younger, is, according to Trump, more rational. And of course, that leaves open the room for the Iranian theocracy to start moderating in its stances, the less isolated they become. Netanyahu has responded to some of this criticism. We're going to play you a quick clip there of Netanyahu. This is subtitled, so those of you who are listening instead of watching, it is effectively Netanyahu saying that this is a deal made by the United States, and he believes he can achieve both supervision and dismantling of the nuclear program. Netanyahu says that's his decision, meaning Trump. I repeat, that's his decision. He is leading it. Of course, I expressed my views in various conversations. On the other hand, I said we have our own interests. This is Netanyahu making it clear that it's Trump forcing this through. Of course, this is him attempting to save his own skin by telling the Israeli public he did what he could. Let's just play you this clip. The subtitles are at the bottom of the screen here for you.
אתם אמרתם שאתם לא מחויבים לסעיף לבנון בהסכם הזה. האם אתם מחויבים להסכם איראן בהסכם הזה?
שוב, ההסכם הזה הוא נעשה על ידי ארצות הברית, על ידי נשיא ארצות הברית, באמת לשלב גם את פתיחת המצרים וגם את ביטול תוכנית הגרעין, ואמרתי, זו החלטה שלו. אני חוזר ואומר, זו החלטה שלו, הוא מוביל את זה. ואני כמובן הבאתי את דעתי בשיחות שונות. מנגד, אמרתי שיש לנו אינטרסים שלנו.
אדוני...
That's effectively Netanyahu saying this is Trump's doing. We voiced our concerns, but beyond that, there's nothing we can do. That is, in fact, Netanyahu saying, look, the deal is going to go through. But the core point here is what has been the American reaction to the Israeli rejection of the deal. And this is where, to sum up the stream today, we're going to show you some key points, both from J.D. Vance and President Trump, effectively telling the Israelis that they don't care if they like the deal or not. It's going to go through regardless. So first up is on CBS News, which, of course, staunch American Zionist Barry Weiss recently took over. So it's a key news channel for Vance to make this point on. And this is now enlarged on your screens. This is J.D. Vance telling CBS News that ultimately we expect everybody, including the Israelis, to end up signing on to this deal and doing as they're told, for want of a better phrase.
This before you go. Is Israel on board with this? It doesn't appear so at this time. What are you hearing? What are you thinking?
Well, Gail, of course, Israel's been a good partner, but we do expect everybody in the region. They've been participating in this peace agreement. They've been participating in our talks with Iran. They understand where our perspective is. And what the president has said is that we expect everybody to honor this agreement. There are always, Gail, these bumpy moments with these ceasefires. Sometimes someone will fire and sometimes somebody responds. We think right now that there are probably people within Iran, because the internet blackout, they're not even aware that this deal has happened. So we certainly expect the Israelis are going to be a participant in this peace process, but we think it's going to be good for them. It's going to be good for us. It's going to be good for the Gulf Coast Coalition. And Gail, if the Iranians comply with their end of the bargain, it's going to be good for Iran. It's going to totally change their relationship with the region in a way that will generate a lot of prosperity for their people. But again, only if they meet their end of the bargain.
All right, we'll see what happens on Friday. A lot of people are saying, why don't we sign it today? But you say Friday's a day we'll all be watching. Well, we thank you, J.D. Vance, for your time this morning.
Now, that's the vice president making it clear that the Americans expect every party to go along with this deal, which, of course, implicitly includes Israel. It was about Israel that he was responding, because that was the question asked to him. But President Trump has been even more direct. Now, Axios' Berates has made it very clear. If you remember, just before this deal, the memorandum of understanding was announced by the Pakistanis, Netanyahu once again resumed his bombing in Lebanon, widely interpreted as an attempt to scupper the deal. And on your screens now and enlarged is the reaction of President Trump to that bombing of Lebanon by Israel just before this deal was announced. Axios' Berates reports, President Trump told me, why did Bibi Netanyahu have to do a fucking attack? I was so pissed off. I let him know. He has no fucking judgment. I let him know that. These are the words of President Trump talking about Israel. It's truly unprecedented. And then he continues, Berates from Axios. He says, President Trump claimed in a short interview with me that the signing of the US-Iran deal for ending the war is still on track for Sunday, despite the Israeli strike in Beirut and the Iranian threat to retaliate. And Trump has been incredibly explicit in this regard, not allowing for Netanyahu to jeopardize or scupper the deal in any way, and has been explicit not just in that what we just read for you, which is very explicit, but also in his videos as well. Here he is, as reported by Reuters and Dawn newspaper, Pakistan's longest and oldest English medium newspaper. This is President Trump talking of his reaction to what Israel may or may not do in response to this deal. And it is very candid, more so than many would expect. Many who are anti-Trump voices claiming Trump's in the pocket of Israel. They need to square remarks such as this.
We had a great relationship. Some end details. I didn't like that he did an attack based on there's a very minor little thing with some drones that were released, and he ends up doing I saw that attack. I saw where that bomb went. Did you see what happened? That was a vicious, that was too much. You can do too much also. But without the United States, there would be no Israel. Without me, there would be no Israel, because no other president was willing to do what I did. I've had a great relationship with Bibi, but now Bibi has to be more responsible with respect to Lebanon. Now, I'm not happy with the way Israel has handled what happens. It throws a negative light on the big deal, and that's the deal with Iran. So when you ask me about Bibi,
and there you have it. It's incredibly explicit. It's President Trump making very clear that he's not only unhappy with Netanyahu, but he's expecting them to stop. He said that their reaction has been completely disproportionate. And in fact, as he has reported again on Fox News, which we're going to play you now, he's blaming Israel for killing civilians and their disproportionate reaction. Again, demonstrating that the Israelis have no more political room to maneuver. If they do anything after this deal, they will stand completely isolated and, crucially, without American backing in any future war they join. That will sting very differently for them. The Israelis are not used to fighting without American backing. We can assure you that will be a very different outcome. And President Trump's aware of that, which is why he said that without me, Israel would not have survived. Israel will not win in the Middle East without Trump and generally American support. Here is Trump on Fox News saying as much.
Too long and too many people are being killed. An apartment house every time you're looking for somebody. And they're not all Hezbollah, that I can tell you. And I want to let Syria take care of Hezbollah. Because to be honest with you, I think they do a better job of doing it. I didn't like Syria. I didn't like where 2 hours before we're signing the agreement that there was an attack in Lebanon, in Beirut. It was right there. It wasn't like in the southern side, you know. It was in Beirut. I did not like that. I let them know that. I didn't like it, not at all. But I think that Syria, you know, he's pulled that country together amazingly quickly. He's very capable. Protected everything that I've asked for, he's done. And if Israel can't do the job without killing
What you heard there is President Trump making clear, again, we'll just summarize for you, that if Israel can't do the job in Lebanon, they're taking too long, they're killing too many civilians, that he says Syria will get Lebanon, go in with the Syrian military. Israel will then be facing Syria, a country inside Lebanon. Not good news, because the Turks are backing the Syrians, the Saudis are backing the Syrians, the new regime in Syria, the post-Assad regime of Mr. Ahmad al-Shara. And by the way, the Americans are backing the Syrian regime as well. The Americans, the Turks, the Saudis, the Pakistanis will all be on the side of the Sunni Muslim Arab leaders, the new leaders of Syria under Ahmad al-Shara. Again, Israel will find itself extremely isolated. And Trump has just made it very explicit that he wants and expects Israel to get out of Lebanon. And again, one more for you, just to demonstrate Trump's stance on this is categoric, leaving Israel completely isolated in the region if they don't toe the line with regards to this deal. This is, again, Trump on Israel. This clip has some technical issues, so we will include, what we'll do is we'll include that one in the Radical Dispatch for you tomorrow. But the point has been made, I think, with whether we include this clip or not. Clearly, there's some internet issues with this, with the speed of the data connection or something. We have found ourselves unable to play that clip, but it says similar to what you just heard. And recall in last week's stream that was called Trump, I call the shots. Trump tells Netanyahu, I call the shots. There is very little doubt now. There should be very little doubt in that what you've just seen over the course of today's stream is that President Trump is not joking around. He's expecting the Israelis to sign up to this deal, to accept the peace deal, to move forward with it. And the Pakistanis have mediated it. They will make sure that, and with the Turks, they will make sure that the Iranian theocrats also move forward with this deal. And there is very little room left politically for Israel or even Iran to maneuver against the peace in the region. To conclude, we reaffirm our long-held view here that our regulars will be aware of, that we are headed towards a grand regional settlement for peace, not only in the Middle East, not only in the region of the wider Middle East, but also in the world. Russia and Ukraine will also be settled. And all of these multiple wars that we've seen, deliberately provoked by globalists who take the view that war is good for business, they will be wound up. It's why globalists in the Union Party across the so-called left and right of the political spectrum have been so opposed to Trump. And it's why you will see voices that are ostensibly even anti-war coming out against this deal, because the globalists have warmongering globalists have infiltrated the left and the right. By now, that isn't a controversial statement to say. But at the time that LBC cancelled me from the airwaves, that was in 2022, that was a controversial thing to say. How the world has changed. President Trump has demonstrated once again through this deal that he is, in fact, the anti-war president, that he is not in any other country's pocket, that he does put American interests first. All that remains is for us in Britain to end up with a Nigel Farage premiership, so we can continue to get that job done and end the reign of the warmongering globalists. That's all for me for this week. We'll be back next week for the Warrior Creed live stream. But those of you who want the written version of this stream, or indeed the podcast version, go to majidnawaz.substack.com, where you'll find Radical Media, and you'll get the Radical Dispatch with all the receipts and the videos that we showed you today and much more. And there's paywall content on that dispatch as well, but most of it is free for subscribers. But the paywall content is for our premium paying subscribers. With that, you also get access to the podcast version of Warrior Creed. Until next week, we thank you all, and we'll see you next time.
You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge. Witness the strength. Street knowledge. Street knowledge.
Terrorize the jam like troops in Pakistan.
Street knowledge. Street knowledge. Quick service announcement brought to you in part by Warriors.